Hello everyone. Again, Mr. McGee here. We're talking about our oxyacetylene torch operation, setup, safety, etc. This is part 2 of our video. This is the part where we're going to go through and demonstrate how to properly set up our tanks, how to hook up our regulators, the do's and don'ts, things of that nature. So, let's begin. Quick review, safety, from video number 1. Never transport these bottles unless we have a cap on. Never take the cap off unless we have our chains installed, which you can see right down here. Number 3, when you do go to clear these valves while we're hooking up our regulators, make sure there's nobody standing in the path of it. So, real quickly, we have our 2 regulators right here in front of you here. The one on your right would be the oxygen. The one on the left would be the acetylene. The threads are designed so that you cannot hook them up on the wrong tank. So that eliminates one possibility of a mishap. But keep in mind, again, green to green, red to fuel. Your oxygen tanks are typically always green. Your acetylene or your MAP gas, whatever you're using, the colors of these tanks can vary depending on what type of gas is in them. All right, a little bit about these regulators. On our regulator, the portion which screws into the oxygen bottle, the gauge immediately beside where it screws into the bottle is going to indicate our tank pressure. The gauge which is immediately above our line, our green line, that's going to indicate the amount of pressure that we're sending out to our cutting torch or our welding torch or our rosebud for heating, whichever of those that we're using. So again, this is our tank pressure, this is our line pressure. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hook up our oxygen. And anybody recall what's the first thing we're going to do here before we hook this up? Is we're going to clear the valve. So we're just going to crack this briefly. Make sure there's no debris because we don't want it getting in here and damaging our regulator. We're going to hold our regulator approximately level. And most people use a crescent wrench. It applies more torque so you can get the nut tight enough. But I happen to have this wrench here which works quite well. And we're just going to snug this down. And that should do it. Our oxygen is ready to go. Our next move is we're going to hook up our pressure regulator for our acetylene. Same thing. Our acetylene, the gauge closest to the tank is going to be tank pressure, and the gauge closest to the line is going to be our line pressure. One caution I forgot to mention when we were talking in the safety video. Our line pressure indicates up to 15 psi, and then you'll see there's a red band from there on up. Don't ever operate the acetylene if the pressure is above 15, because the pressure becomes the acetylene gas in its, when it's in the line, if it reaches 15 psi or above, it becomes very unstable. It can self-ignite. Again, bad things can happen, and we don't want this happening. Now the tank holds about 250 to 300 psi, but it's stored under different conditions. So when we hook our regulator up and turn the valve on, we're going to see that there's approximately 200 or so pounds of pressure in the tank. But don't ever crank our regulator up so that our line pressure meets or exceeds 15 psi. It's just bad news. All right, so we're going to crack our valve just to clear it. Acetylene has a very distinct sweet smell to it. If you have a leak, you can pick up on it right away. Now, the valve is cleared. We're going to install our regulator just as we did with the oxygen. On the acetylene, the inner fitting is a right-hand thread, and the outer fitting, which is a flare type fitting, is a left-hand thread. So we're going to tighten them up nice and tight, and we should be good to go. Best way to check if you have any leaks. Here's my torches. I have my valve shut off. We're going to open our oxygen valve one full turn, very slowly. Right now this bottle is reading about 2,300 PSI on the tank gauge. Now, I want to check to see if it's leaking. You'd be able to feel it, or you could take a soapy solution and put it on here. We're going to close the valve, and we're going to watch this gauge to see if our tank pressure creeps down. If it creeps down, we've got a leak somewhere. In this case here, the tank pressure is holding fine. It's holding at about 2,300 PSI. So I've confirmed I have no leak there. Now I'm going to open up my valve and get rid of the oxygen. This is how you bleed the line down when you're all done. You'll see your gauge return to 0. Valve off, and then close your oxygen valve. Same goes for the acetylene. We're going to make sure our red line valve is closed. We're going to open our acetylene valve no more than one turn. And again, I recommend this because in an emergency, if you need to shut it down quickly, you don't have to sit there and keep cranking. If it's only one turn, you can close it real quick. Okay, I don't know if you can see this or not, but my gauge, my tank pressure is creeping down, which means I've got a leak somewhere. I'm watching the pressure slowly dropping down. I've got a problem. You can use soapy solution, you can use a wrench, you can use whatever, or soapy solution, yes, to see where our leak's coming from. I'm going to just try to tighten this valve a little bit more. Probably something simple like that. And we'll check it again. Turn our pressure up, and then close the valve. And it's holding this time. So now we've confirmed our regulators are installed correctly, and we have no leaks. Typically, if you're using a cutting torch, you want to set yourself up for, on your oxygen side, about, just a rule of thumb, you want to set your oxygen pressure somewhere around 30 PSI. And you're going to adjust that right here with your regulator. If you tighten the regulator in a clockwise direction, you're going to increase the pressure. And if you want to lower the pressure, you're going to loosen it. So we want somewhere around 30 PSI. With our acetylene, we want somewhere around 5 to 7 PSI, just shooting from the hip. This is just a good number to get you started if you're going to be using a torch. The same thing. We're going to turn our adjuster on the regulator to increase or decrease the pressure. Here again, being careful not to get our gauge or line pressure above 15 PSI because it becomes unstable. All right, another thing you want to make sure of. You'll notice it on the gas side of the torch. The nuts have cuts in them to indicate that they are for that side. The oxygen side, the nuts do not have these relief cuts in them. Want to make sure of that. You also want to make sure that you have some type of backfire prevention device installed right at the handle of the torch. In the unlikely event that you get a backfire through the line, I've seen these lines explode from pressure. So you want to make sure this is nothing more than a check valve that prohibits a backfire, a surge of pressure going back through the line and causing the line to explode. In the next video, We're going to talk about actually lighting these. We'll actually do a shop demonstration as to how to light these up and set our flames, or we'll talk about the 3 different types of flames. We have the carburizing flame, we have the neutral flame, we have the oxidizing flames, and we're going to talk about the proper procedures for using the torch as far as which valves to open, how to adjust it, when to adjust it, how to use the striker. But this concludes our video of how to properly set up our torches. One final thought, when you are done using the torches, and we'll go over this during the demonstration, when you are done using the torches, it is best to bleed the pressure back out of these lines and out of the regulator. What you want to make sure is that you have both of these valves, have both of your valves are closed. You're going to shut down your oxygen, you're going to shut down your acetylene, and then you're going to open the valves and bleed off all the pressure when you're done using. And there you have it.